Halliwell, who was an orphan, who wanted friends, who was 20, by the time he went to RADA, was 26 and bald and very morose and very unappealing in the sense that his own insecurity, his own self-consciousness made him even then make claims for himself which were preposterous. He was going to win the this prize or that prize, and that performance was terrible and his was good, etc. He needed a friend. He needed someone to, as it were, to be the perfect friend. Here comes this country boy who looks at a man who's actually well-read, who is eager for friendship, and misapprehends him. He thinks that Halliwell is sophisticated. Halliwell wasn't particularly sophisticated at all at that time, or at any other time. But he thinks that this is sophistication because he is ill-read, because he isn't really educated at all. And he, very much like Sloane, is talked into a relationship that we know he didn't necessarily want.
What is all this laying about in the dark, anyway? Got a headache or something?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Fresh air is what you need. It's no good playing for sympathy with me, you'll find. I've heard all this you've been telling my sister, all this about you being an orphan and everything. Well, it must have been a rotten life for a kid. Being an orphan and everything. Mixed home, was it?
Just boys.
Oh, dear. How many to a room?
8.
Really? Same age, were they, or older?
The ages varied by a year or two.
You had your compensations, then. Keep you out of mischief, eh? Yes, well, as I was saying, the fact is, well, perhaps I was wrong. I just felt that my sister was taking on too many responsibilities. She's a charming woman, as a rule.
Yeah.
Married?
No.
Wise man, wise man. Girlfriends?
No.
No, you're a librarian.
No.
Oh, I thought she said...
No, I help out at Len's as a tobacconist, just on Saturdays.
Oh, I see.
He's a mate of mine, Len. You might have chanced to cross him. He was a sailor, too. Lifeguard at the baths one time. Nice chap.
Fond of swimming, are you?
Oh, like a plunge now and then.
Bodybuilding?
Bodybuilding, soccer, pole vault, long distance, 100 yards, discus, putting the shot, relays, hammer, javelin, 440, hurdles.
My word.
Yes, I'm an all-rounder. Great all-rounder. Anything you care to mention?
Here was a man who had some money, who inherited some money, who would keep him, they had a lot in common. What they also had in common was they both wanted to be famous. And Orton provided the gaiety, the fun, and Halliwell provided the learning, the mind, the kind of... Orton was the sort of Dionysian force to some degree. Don't want to play that up too much, but that is to some degree. And Halliwell was discipline, control, order, you know, and to some extent knowledge. And those two opposites combined and made, I think for a while, from all we can gather, a very happy team, because they had a mission. They had a goal. Their goal was to get educated and get published and get famous.
The first people to hear from this extraordinary literary partnership were two publishers, Richard Brain and Charles Monteith.
I'll show you, if I just might interest you, one of the submission letters. Now, the next one that came along was the boy hairdresser, signed, rather neatly, you see, Kenneth C. Halliwell and John K. Orton. Always, for the first year or two, they came in with this sort, a very prim, old-fashioned little submission letter, signed together with two separate signatures.
And they were all the work of both of them?
That's right. Oh, certainly so, yes.
Who do you think wrote what in those early works?
Well, we hadn't any view at all until we actually met them. Would you like me to talk about that?
Yes, I would. I'd
That,
love
that
to
I
know.
think is how we first began to speculate.
Who
I mean, naturally, we talked a lot about this strange pair sending in this flood of stylish but ultimately unpublishable manuscripts. Not unpublishable on grounds of obscenity, but they just weren't quite right up to that stratum you need for the publication of this particular kind of thing. So we got so curious about them, rather obsessed by curiosity about them, that we wrote and said we'd like to meet them. And we made an appointment. We met them in the Imperial Hotel in Russell Square, in the Barncourt Bar, I think. And there we saw this bizarre couple for the first time. We thought we had some difficulty spotting them, but they looked so peculiar that we had no doubt at all it was them.
Halliwell began Orton's literary education. Together they made lists of metaphors, titles, fragments that might be of use to a writer, as Orton wrote in his posthumously published novel, Head to Toe.
Gombold bought a dictionary and began to study the construction of a sentence. He started to construct the perfect sentence. He studied the chemistry and behaviour of words, phrase design, the forging, casting and milling, the theories of paraphrase, the fusing and aiming.
I think John did the typing, the actual writing, and the awkward over-elaboration of this rather fantasy style was very much Ken Halliwell's.
Wasn't unlike, Rofe, Hadrian the Seventh.
Exactly.
It was that kind of prose.
I think the first time we noticed what subsequently we learnt to be a dramatist at work was when we, at Mill Road, heard their
Mrs. Dale.
Mrs. Dale's diary, which they had tape recorded and included every manner of sort of obscene confrontation that the
right.
characters in the standard Mrs. Dale's diary could take part in.
They tape recorded from the radio the introductory music of Mrs. Dale's diary, which of course is now, I suppose, a semi-forgotten program, but everybody listened in those days who were in the afternoon. They had tape recorded the music, and by the way, this tape recorder they'd bought was one of their luxuries, with this extra bit of savings they'd built up. And then it led into a scene set, I think, in the drawing room and the kitchen of the Dales household. And certainly Mrs. Dale played a prominent part. And there was certainly either a broken broom handle or a kind of an umbrella with one of those knobbly handles. But all sorts of antics were got up to. And the only funny bit I can remember was that Dr. Dale himself, as he used to do, I think, in the serial on the radio, used to come in at the most odd and embarrassing moment and say, "Well, time for a cup of coffee." And then it all petered out with the tailing off music.
We used to visit Joe, my sister and myself, and my mother, once a year. Had a day trip to London once every year. And I can remember when we first went down, my mother wanted to go to the lavatory, and you showed her into the bathroom, and she was absolutely amazed because over the bath there's this huge naked man that somebody had painted, and she thought it was just terrible. She thought that was awful. And we used to have things like Battenberg cake and sandwiches. He was always, I got the feeling at those times that not always, but at times he was setting us up just to see our reaction. He just loved to be the fly on the wall, Joe did. And he used to have this Battenberg cake, and he used to bring it in, and it was just an ordinary Marks and Spencer's Battenberg. And he used to say, "Isn't it wonderful? Look at the shape, it's so symmetrical, isn't it? Look at it, it's absolutely wonderful." And he always used to remind me of the King's new clothes, isn't it? Oh, isn't it? Ah, isn't it? Absolutely.
They entertained us, and it was one of the most bizarre and terrible meals I've ever eaten, because to save their money, to make their lump of savings last as long as possible, they used to live mostly on rice and fish, and some golden syrup, which they thought was very nourishing. The whole thing cost very little, so we had a meal consisting mainly of rice, fish, and golden syrup.
Well, the first course was rice and sardines, and the second course was
Rice.
differently cooked rice with golden syrup.
Golden syrup, that's right.
Ah.
And then we did discover then, in fact, how they passed their day, which I'd never been quite clear about, and I found it absolutely fascinating. If they were living off their savings, and therefore nothing, so to speak, to do except write, they didn't write all day, but to save electricity, they would get up at first light, They passed the time by reading aloud to each other very long books. They would then write, and then somehow we all broke off. And it was one very sad day, and I was on holiday in Greece, I remember, years ago, when I picked up, I'd been wandering around in the Halkidikias, in the north of Greece, and with a couple of friends drifted into Salonika, Thessaloniki, for a day or two. And there bought, as one does in a weak-minded sort of way, I think, some of the English papers when they were on sale at a vastly expensive price. And looking at the Times, saw this appalling report of 2 young men being sent to jail for mutilating books from public libraries. And then I read it and thought, oh my goodness me, it's Kenneth and John. And I wrote them off after that. I thought, well, dear. I mean,
It wasn't altogether appalling. It was also quite funny.